What happens when Hollywood's most beloved smartass meets late-night television's biggest power player, and neither one is willing to back down? The answer is chaos, controversy, and one of the most explosive moments in live television history that had security rushing the stage and producers scrambling to cut the feed. This is the story of how Ryan Reynolds went from charming guest to persona non grata in less than 20 minutes, turning what should have been a routine promotional appearance into a career-defining moment that nobody saw coming. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling me which celebrity feud shocked you the most. Because trust me, this one is going to blow your mind. It all started on what seemed like any other Tuesday night taping of Jimmy Kimmel Live. The audience was buzzing with anticipation, as they always do when a major A-list celebrity is scheduled to appear, and Ryan Reynolds was riding high on the success of his latest blockbuster. Behind the scenes, everything appeared normal. The usual pre-show rituals were taking place, makeup artists were putting finishing touches on both host and guest, and producers were running through the standard talking points that would keep the interview flowing smoothly. But something was different that night. Something that the production team couldn't have anticipated, no matter how many years of experience they had under their belts. Ryan Reynolds walked into that studio carrying more than just promotional material for his latest project. He was carrying a grudge, and not just any grudge, but one that had been festering for months behind the carefully constructed facade of Hollywood politeness. The tension actually began building weeks before the scheduled appearance, during what industry insiders call the pre-interview process. This is where guests and hosts typically establish the boundaries of their conversation, deciding which topics are fair game and which ones should be avoided. It's usually a mundane affair, handled by assistants and producers who coordinate the logistics while keeping everything friendly and professional. However, when Jimmy Kimmel's team reached out to Ryan Reynolds' representatives, they encountered something unexpected. Instead of the usual list of safe talking points about upcoming movies and personal anecdotes, Reynolds' team delivered a very specific and very unusual request. They wanted to discuss something that most celebrities would consider career suicide, to bring up on national television, something that could potentially destroy relationships and burn bridges throughout the entertainment industry. The request was so unusual that it made its way up the chain of command, eventually landing on Jimmy Kimmel's desk personally. Most hosts would have immediately shut down such a controversial topic, especially one that could potentially implicate other major players in Hollywood. But Jimmy Kimmel had built his career on pushing boundaries and wasn't about to start playing "It's safe now," especially not with someone he considered a friend and frequent guest. What neither man realized was that this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would culminate in one of the most shocking moments in late-night television history. The green light was given, the stage was set, and both men walked into that studio thinking they could control the narrative that was about to unfold. As the show began that night, everything proceeded according to the usual format. Jimmy delivered his monologue with the sharp wit that had made him a household name. The audience responded with the expected laughter and applause, and the energy in the room felt electric in all the right ways. The first guest, a rising pop star promoting her debut album, sailed through her segment without incident, charming the audience and giving Jimmy plenty of material to work with. But as the commercial break before Ryan Reynolds' segment began, something shifted in the atmosphere of the studio. The production assistants seemed more tense than usual, whispering urgently into their headsets and exchanging worried glances. Even the audience seemed to sense that something significant was about to happen, though they had no idea what they were in for. Jimmy Kimmel himself appeared unusually focused as he reviewed his notes one final time, his typical pre-interview banter with the audience noticeably absent. Meanwhile, Ryan Reynolds sat in the green room, declining the usual offers of water or coffee, his attention fixed on his phone as he scrolled through what appeared to be a lengthy document. His publicist stood nearby, making last-minute calls that seemed increasingly frantic with each passing minute. When the stage manager finally gave the signal that they were coming back from commercial, both men took their positions with the kind of professional composure that comes from years in the business. The audience applauded enthusiastically as Jimmy introduced his guest, and Ryan Reynolds walked out with his trademark smile and casual confidence, waving to the crowd as if this were just another routine appearance. The first few minutes of the interview followed the expected pattern. Jimmy asked about Ryan's latest project. They exchanged some playful banter that had the audience laughing, and everything seemed to be proceeding smoothly. Ryan was in his element, delivering the kind of self-deprecating humor and quick-witted responses that had made him one of Hollywood's most sought-after talk show guests. But then something changed in Ryan's demeanor, something subtle that only someone who knew him well would have noticed. His smile became slightly more forced, his responses a bit more clipped, and there was a new intensity in his eyes that suggested he was building up to something significant. Jimmy, experienced as he was in reading his guests, definitely picked up on the shift but seemed unsure how to respond to it. The moment of truth came when Jimmy, following his prepared questions, asked what seemed like an innocuous question about Ryan's experience working with various directors in Hollywood. It was the kind of open-ended question designed to let the guest share amusing anecdotes and keep the conversation light and entertaining. Instead of launching into a funny story as expected, Ryan paused for what felt like an eternity, his expression growing serious in a way that immediately caught the attention of everyone in the studio. The audience, sensing the change in mood, grew noticeably quieter, and Jimmy's smile began to falter as he realized that something unexpected was about to happen. Then Ryan spoke, and his words cut through the studio's silence like a knife through butter. "You know, Jimmy, that's actually a really interesting question, because I've been thinking a lot lately about the kind of directors who demand certain things from their actors, things that go way beyond what most people would consider professional." The way he emphasized the word professional made it clear that he wasn't talking about normal directorial requests. Jimmy's media-trained instincts kicked in immediately, and he attempted to steer the conversation back to safer territory. "Well, you know, every director has their own style and approach to getting the best performance out of their cast," he said with a nervous laugh, clearly hoping that Ryan would take the hint and return to the usual promotional talking points. But Ryan wasn't having it. He leaned forward in his chair, his body language becoming more aggressive as he locked eyes with Jimmy. "That's exactly the kind of response I expected from you, Jimmy. Always ready with the diplomatic answer, always willing to smooth things over and pretend like everything is fine in our perfect little Hollywood bubble." The audience began shifting uncomfortably in their seats, sensing that they were witnessing something far more intense than the typical celebrity interview banter. Jimmy's smile was now completely gone, replaced by a look of genuine concern as he realized that his guest was not going to be controlled or redirected. "Ryan, I'm not sure where you're going with this," Jimmy said, his voice taking on a slightly sharper edge. "But maybe we should talk about your new movie instead. I know the audience would love to hear about your experience working with such an incredible cast." Ryan let out a bitter laugh that echoed through the now completely silent studio. "There, you go again, Jimmy. Always ready to change the subject when things get a little too real. Tell me, do you actually care about having honest conversations on this show? Or is it all just carefully scripted entertainment designed to make everyone feel good about themselves?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Jimmy's professional composure began to crack. His jaw tightened as he processed what was essentially an attack on his integrity as a host and journalist. The audience could feel the tension building, and many of them began looking around nervously, unsure whether they should continue watching or look away from what was clearly becoming a very personal confrontation. "I've been doing this for a long time, Ryan," Jimmy replied, his voice now carrying a warning tone. "And I've always tried to create a space where guests feel comfortable sharing what they want to share. But I'm not going to let you turn my show into a platform for whatever personal agenda you're pushing tonight." Ryan's eyes flashed with something that looked dangerously close to anger. "Personal agenda?" That's rich coming from someone who's made a career out of asking softball questions and never pushing back when your guests feed you obvious lies. When was the last time you actually challenged someone on this show, Jimmy? When was the last time you asked a question that mattered? The studio audience was now completely silent, and several people in the front rows looked genuinely frightened by the intensity of the exchange. Behind the cameras, producers were frantically trying to decide whether to cut to commercial or let the confrontation play out, knowing that either choice could have serious consequences for the show and everyone involved. Jimmy's face was now flushed with a combination of embarrassment and genuine anger. You want me to ask hard questions, Ryan? Fine. Let's talk about your reputation in this industry. Let's talk about the stories I've heard about your behavior on set, the way you treat people when the cameras aren't rolling. How's that for a hard-hitting question? The gloves were officially off, and Ryan's response was immediate and vicious. My behavior on set? That's hilarious coming from someone who spent the last decade kissing up to every major studio executive and network. Boss in town, you want to talk about behavior, Jimmy? Let's talk about how you've systematically avoided asking real questions about the industry you claim to cover. Jimmy stood up from behind his desk, something that veteran talk show viewers knew was a very bad sign. You know what, Ryan? I think this interview is over. You came here tonight with some kind of chip on your shoulder, and I'm not going to let you use my show to work out whatever personal issues you're dealing with. But Ryan wasn't finished, not by a long shot. He also stood up, matching Jimmy's aggressive posture as the tension in the room reached a breaking point. Personal issues? This isn't about personal issues, Jimmy. This is about accountability. This is about the fact that you and hosts like you have created this culture where celebrities can do whatever they want without consequences because nobody in the media has the courage to ask the tough questions. The audience was now completely silent, with many people looking genuinely scared by what they were witnessing. Several security guards had appeared at the edges of the stage, clearly ready to intervene if the situation escalated any further. The camera operators continued filming, but their hands were visibly shaking as they tried to capture every moment of the unprecedented confrontation. Jimmy's voice was now raised to a level that the audience had never heard before. You think you can come on my show and lecture me about courage? You think you can sit there and attack my integrity while hiding behind some self-righteous crusade? If you have something specific to say, then say it. Otherwise, get off my stage. Ryan smiled, but there was nothing warm or friendly about it. It was the kind of smile that predators give their prey right before they strike. You really want me to say it, Jimmy? You want me to tell your audience about the conversations I've had with other actors, the stories they've shared about what really goes on behind the scenes? You want me to name names and talk about the things that everyone in this industry knows, but nobody has the guts to discuss publicly? The threat was clear, and Jimmy's face went pale as he realized that Ryan was prepared to go nuclear on live television. The studio fell into a silence so complete that the only sound was the humming of the cameras and the nervous breathing of the audience members. Behind the scenes, producers were now in full panic mode, with some screaming into their headsets while others frantically searched for the emergency cut switch. You wouldn't dare, Jimmy said, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow still, audible throughout the entire studio. The confident host who had started the evening was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely terrified of what his guest might say next. Ryan took a step closer to Jimmy's desk, his movements deliberate and calculated. Try me, Jimmy. You've spent years building this nice, safe little bubble where everyone plays by the rules and nobody rocks the boat. But what happens when someone decides they don't want to play your game anymore? What happens when someone decides that the truth is more important than keeping the peace? The security guards moved closer to the stage, their hands hovering near their radios as they prepared for whatever might happen next. The audience members in the front rows began to lean back in their seats, instinctively trying to put distance between themselves and the escalating confrontation. Some people in the back began quietly making their way toward the exits, not wanting to be caught in the middle of whatever was about to explode. What happened next will go down as one of the most shocking moments in live television history. Ryan Reynolds looked directly into the camera, completely bypassing Jimmy, and addressed the millions of viewers watching at home. You want to know what really goes on in Hollywood? You want to know why certain stories never make it to shows like this one? It's because hosts like Jimmy here are too invested in maintaining their relationships with the power players to ask the questions that actually matter. Jimmy lunged forward, reaching for Ryan's microphone in a desperate attempt to cut him off, but Ryan was ready for him. He stepped back smoothly, keeping the microphone just out of reach while continuing his explosive monologue. 3 weeks ago, I sat in a meeting with executives from a major studio, and they told me exactly which topics were off-limits for this interview. They had a list, Jimmy, a list of things I wasn't allowed to discuss, and you agreed to every single item on it. The audience gasped audibly as they realized they were witnessing the complete breakdown of the carefully controlled world of late-night television. Jimmy's face was now bright red, with a combination of fury and humiliation, as he realized that his guest was systematically destroying everything he had worked to build over his career. "That's enough!" Jimmy shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. He turned toward the producers offstage and made a cutting motion across his throat, the universal signal to end the broadcast immediately. But Ryan wasn't finished. Not even close. "You want me to stop, Jimmy? Then answer one simple question. Tell your audience about the phone call you received yesterday morning. Tell them about the conversation you had with the studio head, who specifically instructed you to keep this interview light and promotional. Tell them about the threats that were made if you didn't comply." The security guards finally moved in, but Ryan held up his hand in a gesture that somehow managed to freeze them in place. There was something in his demeanor that suggested he had more ammunition to deploy. And everyone in the studio seemed to sense that interrupting him now would only make things worse. Jimmy's voice was now shaking with barely controlled rage. "You have no idea what you're doing, Ryan. You think you're some kind of crusader, but you're just a bitter actor who can't handle the way this business works. You're destroying your own career for what? Some misguided sense of righteousness?" Ryan laughed, and the sound was both bitter and triumphant. "My career? Jimmy, I've been planning this moment for months. You think I walked in here unprepared? You think I didn't consider the consequences? I've got backup plans for my backup plans, and frankly, I'm tired of pretending that everything is fine when it's not." The studio audience was now in complete chaos, with some people standing up to get a better view while others continued heading for the exits. The energy in the room was electric and dangerous, like the moment before a lightning strike. Camera operators continued filming despite the obvious distress of their producers, who were now screaming conflicting instructions from the control room. "You want to know what's really funny, Jimmy?" Ryan continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Everyone in this industry knows exactly what I'm talking about. They've all experienced it. They've all been silenced by it. And they've all chosen to play along because it's easier than fighting back. But I'm done playing along." Jimmy made one final desperate attempt to regain control of his show. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption. We're going to cut to commercial, and when we come back, we'll have some great music for you." He gestured frantically toward the control room, but the producers seemed paralyzed by the unprecedented situation unfolding before them. "There's not going to be any commercial break, Jimmy," Ryan said with deadly calm, "because what I'm about to say next is going to change everything, and your bosses know it. They're probably on the phone right now trying to figure out how to do damage control, but it's too late for that." The moment stretched on forever, with both men staring at each other in a battle of wills that had captured the attention of everyone in the studio. The silence was so intense that it felt like the entire world was holding its breath, waiting to see who would blink first. Then Jimmy Kimmel did something that no one expected. He walked around his desk, approached Ryan Reynolds directly, and got so close that their faces were only inches apart. If you think you can come on my show and destroy everything I've worked for, you're wrong. If you think you can use my platform to settle your personal scores, you're wrong. And if you think I'm going to stand here and let you finish whatever twisted game you're playing, you're dead wrong. Ryan's response was immediate and explosive. Your platform? Jimmy, this isn't your platform anymore. The moment you decided to take orders from studio executives about what questions you could and couldn't ask, you gave up any claim to journalistic integrity. You became a puppet, and tonight everyone gets to see the strings. The confrontation had now reached a level of intensity that genuinely frightened everyone present. Security guards moved in from multiple directions, clearly preparing to physically separate the two men before the situation could escalate any further. The audience members who hadn't already left were now openly scared, with many people covering their eyes or looking away from the stage entirely. Jimmy's final words were delivered with a venom that shocked even seasoned television professionals. Get him out of here. Get him out of here now, and make sure he never sets foot in this building again. This interview is over. This friendship is over. And his career in this town is over. Ryan Reynolds was escorted off the stage by 4 security guards, but he managed to get in one last shot as he was being led away. The truth always comes out eventually, Jimmy. You can silence me tonight, but you can't silence everyone. This is just the beginning. The studio fell into stunned silence as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Jimmy Kimmel stood alone on his stage, looking shell-shocked and defeated, while his producers scrambled to figure out how to salvage what was left of the broadcast. The audience sat in their seats, unsure whether they should applaud, leave, or simply wait for someone to tell them what to do next. And that's how one of Hollywood's most beloved actors went from charming guest to banned persona in less than 20 minutes, creating a moment of television history that no one who witnessed it will ever forget. The fallout from that night would ripple through the entertainment industry for months to come, forever changing the relationship between celebrities, hosts, and the uncomfortable truths that everyone pretends don't exist. What did you think about this explosive confrontation? Have you ever seen anything like this happen on live television before? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories from the world of entertainment that you won't hear anywhere else.